Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmentalism, which is Pakistan's first ever podcast series on environmental issues in Pakistan, South Asia region, and the rest of the world. Environmentalism is designed to shed light on emerging local and regional environmentalists who help shine light on pressing and rapidly occurring environmental change. With that, I would like to introduce to our guest today, who is from Pakistan. Miss Nusrat Ehsan. Miss Nusrat Ehsan is working as a is a visiting lecturer at the Department of Environmental Management in National College of Business Administration and Economics, Lahore. Nusrat Ehsan is a PhD scholar who has conducted her research in climate change, simulation, and its impacts on agriculture and food security in Punjab, Pakistan at the Department of Agriculture, Biological Engineering, University of Florida, USA. Ms. Nusrat Ehsan has served in University of Lahore as a lecturer at the Department of Environmental Science for 6 years. She is an enthusiastic researcher with focus on diverse environmental issues like climate change, carbon sequestration, food security, water pollution, and environmental toxic impact on human health. Beside research activities, Ms. Ehsan has worked as environmental consultant at private consultancies for 3 years. During this period, she has worked on many environmental impact assessments (EIAs) and also on initial environmental examination (IEE) and social reports like land acquisition and resettlement plans. Ms. Nusrat Ehsan has skills on many software tools used for statistical analysis, evaluation, and reporting, such as DSAT, Stigma Plot, Minitab, SPSS, and GIS. Based on her research, she has published a good number of publications on in renewed, pre-reviewed national and international journals, conferences, and workshops. With that, I would like Ms. Nusrat Ehsan to please come forward and talk about a bit about herself. Over to you, Ms. Nusrat.
Thank you so much for inviting me in this environmentalism. I'm really glad to see that people, especially the youngsters, are working as activists towards the environment. As for me, I am a researcher. I am just exploring the environment, and I am just trying to figure out on my end what role I can particularly play as a researcher towards the environment. So, what I have done during the past 10 years as a researcher, I have explored in the field of water pollution. I have worked on the toxicology and especially talking about the climate change. So during the past 5 to 6 years of my PhD, I am particularly working on the food security and the climate change and the particular impacts of the climate on the agriculture production. And beside this, the toxic environment and the toxic impacts of the pollution on the environment and especially on the human beings, this is the main focus of my studies and my activism towards the environment.
Okay, that's great, Ms. Nusrat. I think we all are here on just to shed light on what we are doing for the betterment, and this is what environmentalism is all about. With that, I will move towards my first question that I want to ask you. What is climate simulation?
So when we are talking about the climate simulations, we need to focus on what are the basic variables which contribute the climate. So according to the International Panel for the Climate Change, the climate is defined the study of the variables over a period of 30 years. Either that is in the past, either we see that what has happened during the past 30 years, or what we see what will happen in the next more than 30, 50, or 100 years. So that are the particularly the climate simulations, which means that we are forecasting what will happen in the future, either that is the mid-century or that is the end century. So there are different variables which contributes towards the climate. One of them is the temperature. We see that during the baseline period, like when we define that what has happened in the past, we see that what are the contributors which has increased the temperature, and what are the basic factors which contribute in the oscillating temperatures. Similarly, the other parameter is the precipitation, which is also known as the rainfall. So you have seen that in many regions, you can observe that in many regions the pattern of rainfall has changed. In some region it has increased, in some region it has decreased, and in some regions there is uneven pattern. So similarly, the third parameter which we consider in the climate is the solar radiations. Solar radiation means how much the solar energy or the sunlight is being absorbed by a piece of land. Per meter square of land, we measure it in watt per meter square. In simple terms, we say that the solar radiation or the sunlight which is being absorbed by the land. Similarly, we have other parameters like wind speed, wind direction, and they also contribute towards the climate parameters. So particularly the climate simulation is based on the baseline duration. Let's say that we say what has happened during the last 30 years, and based on that particular parameters, we forecast it for the future. That can be for the mid-century, like we say that we are forecasting for the mid-century and we want to see the impact, what will happen in 2050, 2060, 2070, or even or by the end of century like 2100. So, based on this, what we can do, what is the purpose of conducting the climate simulation? We need to see what are the parameters which are increasing the climatic variations and how we can handle this. We can handle it through the different adaptation measures or through the different patterns. So, this is the basic theme for the climate simulation, which in simplest words, we can define it as the forecasting of the temperature, forecasting of the climate.
Okay, okay, that's great. Okay, Ms. Nusrat, so we basically climate simulation is the forecasting of the climate. Okay, that's great. Now we'll move towards our next question from you, Ms. Nusrat. That is, what does climate change has to do with food scarcity? And as I've read in your bio, you have a lot of information about this. So I would really like you to, just really talk about this in a very broad perspective, because this is not only an issue that is on national level, it's an issue that is, I think it's a global issue. Over to you, Ms. Nusrat.
Yeah, yeah, this climate scarcity, or which is also known as food security. This is one of the major topics which is being in the debates, not only on the national level but also on the international level. And because the food insecurity or the scarcity, this leads towards many problems, many regional problems, local problems, the competition between the individuals, the competition between different people, different regions for getting the resources and getting the high quality of food. So, before getting started with the or defining the parameters which are related to the food scarcity, we need to focus what is the food security. We need to understand that food security is based on three basic pillars or three basic parameters. One is the availability. One availability means how much the food is available, either that are the crops, either that are the fruits, vegetables, or the requirement of that region. Either the sufficient quantity is available in a specific region or this is not available. So next is the accessibility. Accessibility means that if the resources are present, if the food, crops, and other things are present, either the people, all of the people in the community, are have the access to achieve that particular food, or there are some limitation. These limitations can be either of the economical parameters, either that can be the traveling or transportation. So there can be different reasons. And third basic is the affordability. Affordability means that either the people in the community, all of the people in the community have the financial stability to afford that food over a period of time. Like if in a developing country or underdeveloped nation, many people there are cannot afford food. So either they are compromising on the quality of food or they are compromising on the quantity of food, which is dangerous, which is toxic for their health. So, for food security, we classify that all the people have the availability, access, and affordability of the food. So next we see that what are the factors which causes the food scarcity or food insecurity. So there are many natural causes as well as there are some anthropogenic causes. Some natural causes includes like major disasters. Every year we see that there are some floods, there are some droughts, some flash droughts, by which there is loss of many crops, many fruits, vegetables, and they have a very long-term impact either on the regional level or on the local level. Similarly, we have some anthropogenic parameters or causes like increase in the population. One of the very basic cause that our population is increasing at a very high rate. And with the increasing population, this is directly proportional that as the individuals increases, the demand for the food is increased. So when the demand is increased, more food is required because to fulfill their dietary needs, and we need to produce more food. Similarly, urbanization. Urbanization is another cause. As we are moving towards the urbanization, majority of the population in the developing countries, they are switching towards the urbanization. By this movement, what happens, our dietary needs and the consumption pattern of the food is changed. If we are consuming more meat, moving towards a more meat consumption and specific vegetables and crops as compared to the diversity, which is placing pressure on production of specific crops and agriculture productions, including the livestock. And so basically, we can say that the factors are classified into the quality and the quantity. And with the food insecurity and the climate change, we are getting impact on both the quality and the quantity of the production. And when we link the both food security and the climate change, we see that climate change is a factor which is both the natural and the man-made caused. Or you can say that this is anthropogenic. Like when we see that there are some natural factors which we cannot control, like there are floods, there are some rainfalls and their patterns which we cannot fulfill or we cannot control. This is not at the end of the humans. On the other hand, there are some certain reasons which are is causing the climate change, like emission of the greenhouse gases, which is increased by the industrialization. With the increase in industrialization, the carbon dioxide emission, the greenhouse gas emissions is being accelerated, is being increased, which is causing the global increase in temperature. And this increase in temperature causes inappropriate patterns of rainfalls, humidity, and similarly the droughts. So, when we particularly link the climate change with the food security or scarcity, we see that in many regions, in Pakistan particularly, when we talk, the pattern of temperature has changed. The temperature has increased from a massive increase in during the past 30 years, and this increase has led towards the food scarcity. Although there is production, but this that production is insufficient to feed all the individuals in the region. Similarly, our dietary needs has changed over the past few years. There is massive change in our dietary consumption during the past 30 years. Just talking about the 30 years, have moved towards more meat consumption, more rely on the livestock as compared to the vegetables, crops, and like that. So this change in the climate, like floods, droughts, and the rainfalls, this all led towards the insecure production levels. Like we are not sure that the production which we have achieved this year will be continued to the next year. Either we will get the same production level or that production level will decrease.
Okay, so that is how rising temperature, increase in population, urbanization, and is impacting on the quality and the quantity of food, and what causes the food insecurity. So yeah, that is amazing, Miss Nusrat. With that, I'll move to my other question from you. That is, what are the impacts of agriculture, of climate change on agriculture? Now that we know that climate change has been, it's a global issue. So how is it impacting? How is it impacting the agriculture in Punjab or in Pakistan?
This is really a very detailed question and a very important question when we are talking related to the climate change and agriculture. That what common man has to do with the change in the climate and agriculture. So I emphasize that the changing in the climate, the climate is impacting every one of us. Either we are environmentalists or we are not the environmentalist. This is directly impacting all of us. How? Because as in the earlier question, I mentioned that climate change is impacting both on the quality and quantity of production. Quality means that the pure forms or the different varieties of wheat, of crops, and fruits, vegetables, or even if in the livestock, if we see, we are moving towards the other forms, which other cultivars, which are not as efficient as compared to the others. As compared to the others, or you can say that we are moving towards more synthetic production as compared to the natural products, natural organic products. So broadly, when we classify the impact of climate change on agriculture, we can classify them into the basic impacts on the health. Then we can classify them on the impact on the economy, and economical impacts can be both regional or international level. So when we talk about the impacts of climate change on human health, we can say that every crop, every vegetable, every livestock which we are consuming right now has impacts of the climate change, because the earlier production, the production time which was required for a particular crop or product is not fulfilled. So either we are making them getting them produced by some synthetic production or some other means, so which has deteriorated the quality of food or quality of products. If we see that there are many diseases which are associated with this production, like when there is less quantity of production, many children in the regions move towards the malnutrition. That means that their dietary requirements are not fulfilled. This term these days is known as the nutritional deficiency. Many micronutrients which are required by the human body, they are not fulfilled. Either we are consuming food and we are getting more quantity of food as our body requires, but that food quality is not as good as we need to consume. So next thing is that the agriculture production has impacts on the economy. Like if we see that on the regional level or international level, we all know that Pakistan is agriculture based economy, and not only in the Pakistan but in the on international level, different products in Pakistan are being exported, like mangoes, like wheat, like rice. These are the three pet crops and agriculture productions which are being exported. So, but with the increase in Pakistan scenario, if we see that these productions over the last 20-30 years has drastically decreased, and this quantity is insufficient even to feed the current human population, the current population in Pakistan. So what will happen in the when we simulate it for the future? It indicates that there will be severe economical impacts on the regional level as well as on the international level. Our local trade will get disturbed. Our transportation of food, our export of food, that will be get disturbed, and overall it will affect our economy. We will get the economical loss. So, for any country, this especially whose economy is based on agriculture, it is mandatory to keep the key production sector secure. and Pakistan's key production sector is the agriculture. So this is very important for the Pakistan to make this sector strong by combating the agriculture and overcoming the appropriate adaptation measures.
Okay, that's a really important knowledge that we had. That effect of climate change on agriculture is mostly because of synthetic food, because there is a high demand of food, so there is synthetic production of food which is causing diseases, and that also we have learned that it's causing malnutrition in children, and also if we won't have a proper agricultural um, way of improving our crops, and if you won't come up with something that will overcome environmental issues, then will Pakistan will also have economical loss. Thanks, Ms. Nusrat. With that, I want to ask you one question. That is that as you have conducted your research in climate change simulation and its impact on agriculture and food security in Punjab, Pakistan, have you ever seen changes in agriculture and food security, both, or you can talk about both in positive and in negative ways, like what the positive impacts are and what the negative impacts are?
Yeah, this is one of the very important and common questions which people ask, that what are the outcomes of your research, and being a scholar, what have you observed and what will happen in the next 10 years. So for this, we need to understand the scenario of Pakistan or Punjab, especially during the past 30 years. So during my study, what I have observed that we need to see what happens during the past 30 years, like 1980 to 2010. So during that baseline period, I have found drastic changes in the climate. For example, there is an increase of 1.1 degree centigrade to 2.7, or you can say about 3. 1.1 to 3 degree centigrade increase during the 1980 to 2010. That means that 1 degree centigrade over a decade is increasing in temperature. And on the other hand, if we see that the precipitation has decreased over this period. And the solar radiations have also decreased, which means that Pakistan as a whole is, or Punjab particularly, is getting lesser solar radiations as compared to the previous 10 years, previous times. So this is the baseline which indicated all of the current situations which we observe during about the food security are based on this temperature 1 or 3 degrees centigrade, in which over just if we observe for last 10 years, we see that there is drastic increase in floods, drastic increase in temperature, which we can, as a human, as an individual, we can feel the increase in temperature. So similarly, the precipitation rate, the decrease in precipitation rate disturb the rain-fed areas of Pakistan, means that those areas which are based directly on rain and production, they are getting disturbed. There is obviously less production in those areas which are rain-fed and producing just on the basis of precipitation. So, based on these baseline condition, when I have simulated for the upcoming 50 years and mid-century and 8th century, I have found that the temperature will increase by 4 to 10 degrees centigrade by mid-century and the end century. And this 4 to 10 degrees centigrade, now you can compare it that what happened in the baseline, there was increase in 1 to 3 degrees centigrade. And for the mid-century and end century, the temperature will increase by 4.5 to 10 degrees centigrade. So you can clearly see that what parameters, what results are we facing right now, and what will happen if the same practices are continued and the temperature is increased by 5 to 10 degrees centigrade. So there will be obviously drastic increase in food insecurity, food scarcity, and that will lead towards many problems related to the food insecurity. So a few regions in Pakistan, they are they will produce more crops. There are some regions in which there is less agriculture, but the rainfall pattern will change there, and they will move towards the rain-fed areas of agriculture if there are proper adaptation and switching of agriculture practices. Switching of agriculture practices means either we change the cultivars, we move towards those cultivars or varieties which are more drought resistant, which are more flood resistant, and which are more temperature resistant. So these type of varieties or cultivars will give more production. So similarly, when we are talking about the adaptation practices which can increase the production, includes the changes in the sowing date, the farmer practices for the sowing dates. If we move towards the early sowing, that will lead towards the more production, more timely production as compared to the current practices. Similarly, the use of fertilizers. The current use of synthetic fertilizers is deteriorating the soil quality, which is leading towards a decrease in production. And if we move towards the organic fertilizers or the common practices like tillage or the previous crops residue, these practices can increase our crop production. And similarly, we have to manage the irrigation management. We have to conduct the irrigation management. Irrigation management means the amount of water which we apply for particular crops. So that is also important because we have decrease in water quantity, and every time we are applying the surplus water. And this water irrigation tank is particularly irrigated with the tube wells or groundwater. So that need to be managed to increase the production. So that are basically the management practices which can increase the production in particular areas like of Punjab, like Sialkot, Narowal, and this southern side. I think this will be quite in detail, which I have discussed, and this particularly relates the crop production towards the food security.
Okay, okay, that's great, Miss Nusrat. And yes, it's I think it's an epic information that less rain will have less food production, and because the population is increasing, then we'll have more food insecurity, and food production demand will obviously increase. With that, I have one last question to ask you. Um, as I've read in your bio that you have been a professor. You have been teaching for quite a time now. So I want to know that as you have taught as a professor for environmental sciences, how important do you think environmental education is for our youth in Pakistan?
Oh, okay. So this question is very interesting, and I feel that this environmental sciences or environmental education is not just a subject. This is not only the subject for master students or bachelor students. This is the individual subject. This is that subject which every individual in the society must get into or learn, because this teaches the healthy lifestyle. This teaches the self-organization, like just as I talked earlier, food consumption, our food consumption practices, our waste disposal, solid waste disposal practices, that all depends upon individuals. So this subject is interesting, and I emphasize it as environmental education, as our youth must learn how to organize themselves. They must know that how to move towards the recycling plans, how they should move towards the waste management, just like the common practices of not throwing the waste everywhere, and reuse of different products. So this is one of the aspects which I think that this environmental education is important for our youth. Second thing is the ethics, environmental ethics. This subject teaches the ethics towards not only the living component, other species than the humans, but also towards the non-living component, abiotic factors like water, like air, uh, like uh, like land, everything in the environment, either that is the biotic or the abiotic, has some ethics or have some reason for the survival. And there are the rights towards every abiotic and non-biotic uh, objects to survive. So when one person learns about just take example of the water recycling. Water recycling requires a proper water recharge, proper water disposal and treatment. If one is well aware about this environmentalism or has the environmental education, he must know that what is the value of water. Similarly, there are some sustainable practices like resource management, how we have to manage the resources, and how we can move towards the sustainable development, keeping the economical growth as well as towards the sustainable development. So these are the basic reasons why I emphasize on the environmental issues and environmental education.
Okay, that's great, Ms. Nusrat. Um, Today we have learned from Ms. Nusrat Ehsan a lot of important things about food security, about how that in a couple of time when the population of Pakistan will increase, there will be an increase in food insecurity because the demand of food will rise. We also learned that the impact that the demand of high demand of food will impact on quality and the quantity of food. We've also learned that temperature in Pakistan has risen a lot from past 30 years. And we also came across one of the very important factors that uh, increase in diseases because of synthetic food, because there's a high food security, a food demand that is leading to the insecurity of the food, and that is why we have synthetic food types, which is causing malnutrition in children. And also that if anything goes wrong because of the climate change, because of the change in the rain pattern, then Pakistan will have a lot of economical loss because the country is highly agriculture, and that will have less rain and less food production. And the most important thing that Ms. Nusrat Hassan has shed light on is that environmental education is not just for people who are doing bachelors and who are doing their masters and PhDs. It's more like you learn a basic life skill. If it's not a subject that you just, it's something that everybody should learn from. It teaches about a healthy lifestyle. It also teaches about ethics, environmental ethics. And it is also, if we don't know how to sustainably use our resources, then we probably won't be able to do anything. And eventually, climate change and environmental issues will take all over us. With that, this is Aleha Rathore and Ms. Nusrat Ahsan signing off, hoping that you guys will learn something really important about food security, about how really little things are impacting our earth and how important it is to save the planet. And with that, I always say one thing, that environmental issues are not a regional or a national issue. It's a global, it's an international issue. Please work on it as much as you can. And also every little step that you will contribute will help us move forward. Thank you, everybody.